Welcome, everybody, to the Far and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Scott Jones. I want to thank you for joining us here today and remind you while you're watching the show, just take a moment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share this show with your friends. It's important you do that. And if any time you or somebody that you care about needs help, get them help. Do not wait. Do not believe it's something you could handle on your own, whether it's mental health, addiction, alcoholism, anything. It's better to get the help today because there is no tomorrow. So make sure you guys do that. All right, I got a great guest. This is somebody I've been running into on and off for the past, 8 years, I guess. Different functions, different places. I've seen him speak and never had a chance to really get to know him until today, which is awesome because I'm so glad he's my guest. This is John Hulick. John, how are you, man?
Doing well, Scott. Great to be with you.
It's so good to have you here, man. And I knew we'd be fast friends once we get a chance to talk. So I think we're of the same mind, except for the fact I found out he's a Cowboys fan. I'm telling you that now because if he says something you don't like, that's the reason. Okay. Let me see if I got this right. You work for a company called Commonly Well, and you are the Director of Government Affairs currently.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. This is not where you started your life, though.
This is not where I started my life.
Well, let's start right off because there's so much to talk about, John. First of all, you know, you're very open about dealing with your own addiction or alcoholism. Tell me, I mean, where did you come from? And, you know, just a real brief idea about what your story was.
Yeah, that story was, one in which, at age 12, when I took that first sip, it was the elixir I think I was searching for, where I kind of grew up in my house, cringed over, just waiting for the next smack.
Okay, gotcha.
And just had a mind then that said, when do I get to do this again? And then it was a 12-year foray into active, more progressive alcoholism. And, at age 24, over those 12 years, of course, folks are saying, we think you might have a problem, but incredible amounts of denial. During that period, I was able to go to college and graduate. A year out of college, I owned a home, filled that house with a bunch of my drunk buddies. And when I got sober, I had a sober home before they called them sober homes. You
get sober, you look around, you're like, what the hell am I doing here? It's like a Grateful Dead concert. What am I doing here?
And I always say, Scott, the sober guys were way crazier than any drunk guy I ever lived with.
Almost always, they're capable of doing more damage, is the truth. But that's, it's funny because I just wanted, you made a very strong point there about the alcohol, because of how you grew up and being introverted and covering and hiding and probably shame and other things, that released the part of your personality you could not get out, that loud, that person. It gave you the courage, and that made it very attractive to you. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, and look, we can't avoid the basic fact of, at least the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous is which I have this abnormal reaction now.
Right.
Lots of folks have traumatic experiences, don't become alcoholic, and that's just a fact. For me, I get that woozy effect, and I'm off to the races. People, after a couple get a woozy effect, normally will say, I've had enough. I'm sorry, those words were just never in my vocabulary.
Woozy beats bruises any day. I mean, I could deal with woozy. But this is just a point, and I just wanted to touch on it because I know you're of like thinking. This is why mental health is so important when you're raising kids and making sure that their mental health is good, because you were not only you had a predisposition, or you could say genetics, you could say, it doesn't matter what you believe. The bottom line is you were prepped for alcoholism because you needed it to beat that mental health problem you were having, or the issues.
You called it, it's liquid. It was liquid courage.
Right.
And folks wouldn't experience me usually in this way, but I'm really a shy person.
Right.
It takes energy for me to kind of turn it on. But when we'll be done today, I'll be wanting a nap.
I have a feeling I will too. John, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. It means a lot. So again, that's why I said at the beginning of the show, if you know somebody who's struggling with any kind of issues, we don't know what could happen if we address the mental health and the trauma at the beginning. I think we could avoid a lot of problems. It doesn't mean everything's going to go away because it's always going to be there. But that's good. So you got sober, and I'm sure before you got sober and after you got sober. Before you got sober, what was the plan for John Hulick? What were you going to be? Cowboy, spaceman? What were you going to be?
I was going to be an attorney.
That was always the plan.
That was kind of the plan. Yeah, I was always going to be be an attorney, and thankfully that didn't happen.
Well, you got sober and you went and tried it.
Yeah, I got sober and went and tried it. Exactly.
How long did it take for you to figure out it wasn't right for you?
6 weeks.
That's not long.
18 months sober, 6 weeks in a law school, figuring, man, this is just not for me. And I'm a storyteller, so
yeah,
I always integrated into my story. At 26 years old, I got sober. 24 and 39 years sober, and I called my mom asking for permission to leave law school, and I always joke, and it's the truth. Why am I calling my mom at that age for permission to do anything? And that landed me in a therapist chair, and it's not the first therapist chair that I've been in. I am an absolute product of all kinds of help over time, spiritually, professionally, I'm just blessed to be on this journey, as painful as the human condition can be at points. The guys I sponsor, Scott, I always say, recovery's a ebb and flow. Just do not ebb your way into a sea of alcohol, because there is absolutely no guarantee you can come back. Right.
Absolutely. And I love the point you made that rarely does one path serve enough for a human being to recover from, whether it's alcoholism or trauma or whatever it might be, or mental health issues. You have to take advantage of everything you can. You figured that out early. Most people are just like, I'm just going to go to this meeting, or I'm just going to go to this therapist, and that's all no, you got to remain open to all of that. Why were you so open? Because most people aren't. Was there something about you?
Well, look, and my sponsor I picked up my sponsor back then is still my sponsor today. Imagine that.
Excellent.
And he was one, he was not a big book thumper, but he was very clear with me. John, it's okay to get to speaker and discussion meetings, are great for identification purpose, but the program's in the literature. And in that first 90 days, of course, where I characterize it, and Dr. Bob refers to it as maximum ego deflation,
right.
Maximum opportunity, because the skull is cracked wide open.
Right. Yeah.
Being at literature meetings so early in my recovery and faithful to them, there are these certain spiritual concepts that I say were seared into my spiritual memory bank. One of which is pain is the touchstone to all spiritual progress.
That's
right.
I think pain is the touchstone to most things on this earth, including invention and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I remember just very vividly at that point, and that concept, thinking to myself, this pain that I've experienced was always in a vacuum before. I don't know about the spiritual growth stuff, but at least the pain's serving a purpose. So
right.
Rather than viewing it as an enemy, and I've gotten much more conditioned over a long period of time to not judge it and just experience it, and understanding that it's intended to get me closer to this creator, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it.
Okay. All right. And are you a one and done guy?
I'm a one and done guy.
Now, for those of you who don't know what that means they walked into recovery, whether it's through a treatment center or a rehab, or a mental health, or a meeting, or a therapy session, and they said, I'm done, I'm going to quit. And then they stay quit. It's a rarity. It's like finding a freaking unicorn, people. He's a unicorn over here. Again, I'm sure part of that is because you were so open to doing what you needed to do. But do you attribute that to anything? the reason you were one and done, and a lot of people struggle?
Well, and the curiosity of a cat, I think, over time, and again, not kind of understanding in my early years, particularly, in my youth and my drinking days, but, to be able to kind of put words to it now, and over time, and say, oh yeah, that I'm not as abnormal as this thing called human condition. It's really for everybody.
Wow, I love that. The curiosity is just, you want to see what's around the next corner, and most people don't.
Yeah,
they're like, I'm fine on my corner. I don't need to see what's around the corner,
right.
But you wanted to see.
I've been called it impish.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so yeah.
I've never heard that.
I've been called aloof and arrogant too.
I've been called a few things. Yeah. Even though I can curse, I'm not going to say it because it's really quite rude. And that was by my kids. But that's fantastic. So now you decided, you got sober. You're doing all of this stuff that's new. You're living in Jersey.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if you waited until you were 12 to start using in Jersey, you're like an old man. Because most in Jersey, they start around 7 or 8. You decided the law wasn't for you. What were you kind of looking for at that time?
And I didn't know. I remember I owned a home.
Yeah.
I left that home to go to law school. I'm 6 weeks. And I'm like, oh, I got to go back to my family of origin because I rented out my house. Right. So I still had some bugs to work out with my family, needless to say. But I think that the elements of my faith at that point was as simple as, if you close one door, God will open another. So I did not know what I was coming back to, other than I'm going back to that clubhouse in Trenton, New Jersey that I cut my teeth in that early recovery. And within 2 weeks, and I always say God has a good sense of humor, because he knew I'd better give John something to do, or he would be a danger to himself or others.
Right.
I met a deaf alcoholic in the rooms, and I remember, and I'm a creature of habit, so I would occupy the same seat and my back up against the wall, and I used to think it was, curiosity, really more paranoia.
Right.
You scan the room like this, wait for that pin to hit you in the belt or whatever. But and I'm like looking at like this guy Brian. I would subsequently introduce myself, but like, how's this guy supposed to get sober? I'm having this conversation in my head, and his mom's sitting next to him, and she's mouthing, and I'm like, what the heck? And how's this guy supposed to get sober, get this message that's so important to my own life?
Right, yeah.
And when I tell you that the whisper was not audible, but what came to me was, John, treat him like you would any other alcoholic. And of course, that's reach out to the newcomer. So I never met a deaf person in my life, but I ended up sponsoring him and dragging him around meetings, writing on pads. And, I also didn't know that the deaf community was very grapevine. So before you know it, there's a bunch of other deaf guys showing up to that clubhouse asking for me. So, I was looking for help, and, nothing in New Jersey, nothing really around the country. And so I stood up in 1988, and I had met Brian in October of 87, an agency called Signs of Sobriety. And the purpose of that agency initially was to call one number to tell them there's nothing available. I'm working on it.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So that was the beginnings of my introduction to the field more professionally. That was a real inflection point. I always look at that moment with in that meeting and ask myself, if I had made Brian someone else's problem, my life, I don't know what my life would be, but it would not have thrust me into the journey of servant, being a true servant over the last decades. I mean, it's amazing to say it, but decades. From that, that was professionally. I then met my to-be wife who was deaf, and 3 kids and 2 grandkids later,
Wow.
So my entire professional life and personal life changed at that one moment in Trenton, New Jersey, at the Allan Club.
Well, you took it to the next level with service. Let me tell you, because most people just start making coffee. You decided to work with this program, and which led you into policy and law, didn't it?
Yeah.
The thing that you said, I'm not doing, now you got to do it.
Now I have to do it. Yeah. Yeah. And yes, absolutely. And I again, kind of instinctively, I had this budding advocate in me, even as a teenager. Me and my friend Charlie, we would play street hockey. You remember street hockey was big back in the day, and we got tired of getting beat up by the older guys, so we created our own little mini what we call a junior street hockey league in Hamilton, New Jersey. And I did not come from a political family, but instinctively I knew, and Charlie knew, there's this group of elected officials that can make a decision. So we were playing on public grounds and told we couldn't. So sensible thing was go to town council. So if you go to Hamilton, there's literally a street hockey rink behind the municipal building. And
that was you. Well, you and your friend. Yeah. Wow.
So that was, so that advocate in me, has been there and just allowed to blossom over time.
And that obviously opens up so many different pathways, because there are so many organizations and nonprofits and of course people involved in policy that need help. So I mean, it probably opened up a whole lot of avenues. You had to make some decisions about where you're going to go with all of this. You say you work with the National Council? Yeah,
National Council on Alcohol and Drug Dependence. After 7 years, it signs of sobriety. Turned it over to my successor, who was a deaf MSW in recovery from Gallaudet University. So the agency was to be by deaf for deaf people. So it was to me another God shot.
Right.
The successor was really who this organization was meant to be led by. So that was an incredible moment. Yeah, and I spent 16 years doing all the public affairs policy work for NCADD New Jersey, and that was moments of just I know today in legislation that's been enacted, the folks that have been helped, they're still being helped today. They're just nameless and faithless today.
Right.
So we had quite a number of legislative victories, during that stretch.
Well, the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Addiction is one of the oldest organizations dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction in the modern era. So I'm sure you learned a lot being there. What shocked you when you started getting involved in this, finding out the barriers that people are facing and stuff? Were there things that you said, this can't stand, I got to do something to make changes?
Well, I tell you, what began to shock me, and I was navigating my own daughter's care. That's what shocked me, because I had a very successful legislative career. I mean, I can point to New Jersey and $250 million in new treatment money during that period, collectively, not in one fell swoop.
Yes.
Appropriations that have been renewed over now literally decades. That were a result of our work back then. But when I began to navigate my daughter's care, she has just taught me, everything that I need to know about a very fractured and flawed system, and I, early onset illness to institutionalization, 6th and 7th grade. We did what I call the teen mom drama, and we raised our firstborn grandson. The secondborn was neonatal abstinence syndrome. So great, and I was hell-bent on stopping at 3, It's like, no more, I can't take it. But I really had a moment of just crises, of consciousness crises about this is what I've advocated for, all these years. And I did step away from my tenure because I subsequently joined Governor Christie as a policy advisor for human service, children, and families. Then he tapped me to be the state drug czar, and we were already looking at that in that 2010 to 12 period. We weren't looking at overdose deaths at the time, but we were looking at 25 and unders treatment admissions for heroin and other opiates. And literally, if you looked, and it's a simple trend chart, but like here's mid 2000s and this is 2012. It's a hockey stick. I mean, It does not take rocket science to figure out there's, Houston, there's a problem. And then we ran up against some, bureaucratic naysayers, to be kind. It's an. So folks said I should write a book. I got lots of stories.
You really should. I'm sure some people wouldn't want to hear it though.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Christie has this reputation as being a real hard ass and being really, but he always did care about the drug, getting rid of the drugs and getting rid of and opening pathways for recovery. He was always supportive of that and mental health. Even if he didn't agree with some of his other policies. So I always tip my hat to Christie for doing that.
Yeah, and to be, policy advisor for human service, children, and families, and of course within that portfolio was mental health and addiction. It was a wonderful time. And I didn't have to convince the governor. He was already there.
Exactly.
He points very directly to his experiences as a board member of DATOP, which was that adolescent treatment facility. And he just said, I've witnessed the miracles happen. He, of course, has a very personal story of his mother's addiction to tobacco and cigarettes, but also of a lawyer friend that he watched evolve to alcoholic death. So it was very personal for him. And it was, I'd been in, of course, around that legislative making process for years and working with a number of governors. And it's not just because he was my boss, bar none, he was the best governor on this issue. And over time, as if you got into a budget cycle, a state of the state address, a budget address, typically what governors would do, they would do a shout out to every department under the sun. So
right.
You remember.
Yeah.
But Christie and to his wisdom and to his support staff's wisdom said, we're going to prioritize, issues and in not only the agenda for the first term, but also in the budget address. And inevitably 3 or 4 addiction, except for the first cycle where we were $5 billion in deficit. Which is peanuts now.
Right.
Addiction made it. Every one of his subsequent 7 addresses, addiction was a part of it, which speaks volumes.
Absolutely. That's what you brought up DATOP. My daughter went to the DATOP in South Jersey, and then got in trouble there. And they said, we're sending you to the one in North Jersey, which was, I don't know if you've ever been to the facility. It was beautiful. At it. It's like an old monastery kind of place. And it's beautiful. Peacocks walking around. And it was really neat. But
Father Joe.
Well, they did good work. And it was good working with kids and stuff. But anyway, so you're doing all of this in Jersey. What was the thing that brought you down here to Florida? Because, we're talking about, especially if you're coming down here around when you did, we're just coming out of the crisis of everybody's getting in trouble. Everybody, even the guys who thought they were doing it right, were doing it wrong.
Yes. You
came down to like the wreckage.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, very much so. And even during that period, I was state drug czar for Christie, and we did my daughter, we had some care down here for her in 11 or 12. But I remember turning to my colleagues and friends up in New Jersey. I don't know what's going on in Florida, but it's like the Wild West down there, Now,
honestly, really, even in your role as drug czar, you didn't realize how big the problem was down here? I thought this was big national thing.
It became big national probably, after that.
Okay.
But I was a parent of resilience. I knew the field, I knew the
Yeah.
questions to ask. And when I started asking those questions, and particularly in the sober home environment where she got, and I also didn't realize how rich my New Jersey State insurance card was. the NJX, the platinum card. I had it.
Dude, you were the Vanderbilts with that. And I'm telling you right now, yeah.
Clueless, because I'm a parent. I'm just, trying to navigate her care. And, it almost, the devastation it wreaked in our family, I mean, I became full-time careman. I'm like, people are getting paid for this. Why do I have to do that? Why am I thinking about this? I literally got a call when she was down here in Palm Beach County. I'll never forget it. She was in treatment with that NJX card, and the staff person of this treatment program introduces herself as the discharge planner. And this is
the one who throws you out on your ass. That's what I want to tell you right now.
And this is how it went. I'm the discharge planner, and we're releasing Paige tomorrow. What would you like to do with her?
That was it.
That was it. And so I went ballistic. Like, what's your title? And it shouldn't be this way, but because I was who I was, I get a call from the CEO.
Okay.
Of this well-recognized, nationally recognized treatment program. And I was assured everything's going to be taken care of. So next thing you know, she's transitioned to what they were, the operator was calling a halfway house. And of course, in New Jersey, halfway houses are licensed. There's a lower intensity service, but they're in the regulatory scheme.
Yeah.
So I'm asking halfway house questions. And by the end of that day, Paige had been discharged to the street, and we had to buy her bags back. That was my introduction to Florida. Now, it took 7 years, but that operator got indicted for $52 million in insurance fraud. And
whoa. Say that number again.
$52 million.
$52 million in insurance fraud.
Wow. And he was a 20-something-year-old punk. And I tell you, it's like, this guy has no idea who I am, but he had enough power over me to, toss my daughter out in the street.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
It's like they're trafficking recovery people.
Oh,
and it's just horrible how they were treated and treated by people who are, a lot of them are in recovery who are doing this.
Yeah, which is really a sad part. And when I got sober, I'd already owned a home in a year and 5 bedrooms. And when I bought it, it was Animal House. I bought all my drunk money.
So you had your own version of a halfway house.
I had my own version of a sober. Well, and what I never thought to do, I took my mortgage at the time, divided it by 5 rooms. If someone moved, I'd pick up the slack. I never, for the life of me, never thought to, I was like, God, I could have had that house paid off in spades and bought 5 more, but they were just, that's not how I was just hardwired, maybe to my own detriment. But regardless, that was my first foray, down here into Florida. And you asked how I got here. I'll be honest with you, I was, in 2017, in the throes of really deep, dark despair, depression, which I had struggled with from grade school.
Okay.
And thankfully, she subsequently became a spiritual guide for me. But someone that came up to me after a meeting one day and said, "John, you're sure? Are you okay?" And I just broke.
Wow.
And from that, and God be my witness, through that engagement and some subsequent, I wouldn't call it guided meditation, but I had a white light experience. And when she asked me what I thought that meant, I went, blah, 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 Florida.
Wow.
And my retort back to the creator was, Florida? What in God's the belly of the beast? What in God's green earth could I be doing down there? Little did I know.
Yeah, I think somebody was searching for a mission.
Yeah, someone. You heard me say, "Give me a mission and a white hat," and I'm also a danger to myself and others.
Wow. Well, so you've been down here 8 years.
Yeah. Turn of New Year 2018, I threw a couple of suitcases in the back of my car and, didn't look back since. And
The whole family came with you? Or?
No, we didn't want to uproot the stuff was going on up there.
Okay.
Because my middle son is on the spectrum, and we didn't want to interrupt IEPs.
Oh, of course. Changing in venues and environments could be really damaging.
Right. So you learned that, of course, Frontier was a puddle jump between Trenton Mercer Airport and PBI. So we just had to make it work, and that's it. The torture of a calling and other types of obligations, and the children tend to always come first as they should be. But it gave me an opportunity to come down here and not and becoming aware of what I was told was the county was looking for a county drug czar, and by this time I had already sworn off. I was like, I wanted to be as far away from this field as possible.
Did you really think you were going to get away?
Well,
did you really delude yourself enough to think I'm going to open a McDonald's?
It was so funny because when I left Christie, I created my own consulting firm, Large Government Affairs, and I would swear to God, I would never take a treatment client. Although I probably could have made a lot of money doing so. But you name it. It was solar energy, just whatever it was. But I had one friend and colleague, he's still a good friend today, who said, John, if you could do something, what would you do? And it really was the first time, Scott, I began to think really critically. And so we started to work out a site level project that was non-clinical. And using it as a neighborhood revitalization, urban-centric type of thing with the city of Trenton. I won't get into all of the specifics, but I literally kept in my notes of my iPhone. I was peeking back and trying to clean it up. But from 2015, Signs of Sobriety was born the same way. Just mission, vision, value stuff, committed it. And when I look at it all these years later, it's like, this is what we've lived out. So when I arrived in Palm Beach County, my question was, how do I take this site level curiosity? But we were close to closing on a deal, quite frankly, on a lot of different fronts. It fell through. And if it hadn't fallen through, I would have been staying up in New Jersey. But when I got here, it's like, how do I take this site level work and do a system out of it? And the leap was easy. There's just been in our field, the body of work has been there for decades. No one has ever really dared to execute. And for me, in that role, having more of the ability, I can get in the weeds and roll up my sleeves with the best of them, but also to have that vision and understanding governmentally what government needs. And I'm always answering, and I just messaged someone yesterday. My passion comes from being that voice for the parents of lost, the affected family member, the individual who lived, because I've lived it.
Right.
And they're the best advocates to take that pain and turn it into something purposeful, and that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So where did you ultimately end up, once you got down here as your, because it sounds to me like, you were trying to do something, but something was pulling you to do something else too, right?
Yeah, and so, and whether it's conscious or unconscious, right?
It's a fine line between the two, my friend.
It really is. And over time, with us gifted with some recovery in its pains, that discernment, right? Like that. Like it definitely gets sharper.
By the way, most people who talk about the unconscious mind, it's just another word for I'm in denial about what I'm actually doing. That's all. That's really what it is.
I love it. Forget Freud and Jung.
Right?
Just I'm in total denial.
I don't follow Freud.
Yeah.
You ever look at pictures of him? There's not one picture in existence of Freud smiling. That is not the guy I want to get mental health shit from. Not one picture of him smiling. Yeah. He's miserable and sucking on a cigar. No thanks.
Well, look, and I've been in policy for a long time. And the maximum opportunity for change is often in crises, but you've got to come in with the right solution too. So the county was hungry for leadership. They called it a drug czar. I don't think they had any idea who they were hiring when they hired me. But regardless,
did you chuckle a little bit like, "Oh, you have no idea"?
No idea. And my first appearance before the board, other than an obligatory introduction when I was introduced to the board on some fanciful board day and whipped through Government Center in Palm Beach County, and then like a few weeks later, I'm before the board, and I said, we're going to be moving from a treatment-centric to a more person-centered, recovery-oriented system of care with the aim of improving long-term recovery outcome. That was the stake in the ground. I had already done a lot of the preface work.
Now in layman's terms, it just simply means let's stop supporting the system and start supporting the people and making sure the people have what they need to succeed. Is that like, I got that right?
When the rubber hits the road, it is exactly that. Folks perceive me as anti-treatment. I am not anti-treatment whatsoever. Everybody has, there's some rightful clinical needs for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, and I call it stem to bleeding moment, stabilization. We should look at the treatment intervention for that, and we way over purchase our amount of treatment, and 90% of our resources go to that. And the business model is the repeat visitor. If you want to expand treatment capacity, you do it in a couple ways. One is you do an appropriate level of care determination, and the second is stop the revolving door. But how do you do that? I'm a 39-year one-chip wonder.
Yes.
And if it worked for me, that's great, but it doesn't work for everybody. And what we know over the evidence and body of work over decades is there are other types of supports that are what we call predictive.
Yes.
Topping the list, Scott, is housing stability. Then it's employment, it's transportation, it's strong family and societal connection. And then there is a spiritual or an altruistic component. So as a government person, when I'm setting a goal, it's the natural question, Scott, is this: how do we measure it? Well, I had already been introduced to the concept of recovery capital was well published. The problem was it never became a means to operationalize. In other words, a meaningful instrument to measure. The minute for me, because typically in our field, we measure successful treatment discharge. That right, and trust me, decades. You know what the rate is? 60%. And I'm sorry, if I came home with a 60, I was in trouble.
And 60%, I think, is high. Even I don't even know it's that good.
Exactly. So the idea of this recovery capital, which is an individual's internal and external capacity, it's those things that build resilience in them. And will, and the theory and the evidence now is as those resilient factors increase, the unhealthy behaviors decrease. And we literally in Palm Beach County over 7 years completely reoriented our work from treatment centricity to building out a network of local recovery community centers and organizations that were peer-led, and also opioid settlement, where the real battles came, because I was able to do my work really quietly over a long period of time. Then you introduce new funding to the tune of $125 million, the games start to get played. But on every front, because of a strong and passionate constituency, parents of loss, affected family members, lived experience. In October of 24, the board ultimately approved a plan, including opioid settlement recommendations, that 90% of the monies went to what we call social determinants of health with
Yeah.
housing. So it's the softer non-clinical supports, 10% treatment, which sounds pretty drastic, but when you marry that to the historic 90% treatment, 10% catch as catch can, there's a healthy balance now in Palm Beach County between the two. And the pleasure for me now, one can only take so much of government.
Right,
but
right.
For me, Commonly Well is the vendor that I used to do all of our outcomes measurement. And I was presented with the opportunity because I didn't build the work for replicability purposes, but we were able to put our work to the test. We allied ourselves with Florida Atlantic University as a research partner,
Right.
and from that research, things that matter sometimes to government, peer-reviewed, published articles, evidence. Because I never want to, Scott, and I think you would appreciate this, principles above personality. I never wanted the work to be said it was good because John Hulick said it was. Because if you don't like me, you're not going to like the work.
No, it's got to stand on its own. It's got to have its own empirical value, and it's got to be real.
And
Absolutely.
we were able to take that evidence, the data over time, which if you looked at the 5 highest risk factors of folks engaged in our system over a 7-year period, housing, employment, transportation, access to healthcare, and particularly for the criminally justice involved population, safety. Safety was the strongest relationship in terms of a predictor. In other words, if you felt unsafe, that should be a red flag that it's almost an automatic relapse.
Yeah.
Just boom. But it's taking our field to understand, and as we trained our peers in our centers, I would say, because the jingle works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for the next guy. We've really got to,
and that's why it's got to be client based.
It's got to be,
because if you try to shove everybody into the exact same mold, you're going to end up with a 5% success rate because 95% of the people are going to fall outside of that particular mold. You've got to look around. And I agree with you 1,000%. And if I heard you right, without the focus on the treatment centers and more focus on creating lifestyle, creating habit, creating value, creating value in more than just abstinence, value in working, value in family relationships, value in all of those things through the, like the capital. That's the capital is that value in all those things.
And that's things that we've known has been well published over decades, but we are finally able to measure it.
But you know what the problem is? You know what the problem is, Jen? We're talking about things like it's like we knew years and years and years ago that a healthy pH in the body, most diseases cannot exist. But that discovery was made at the same time they discovered penicillin. And they said, we can't sell balanced pH, but we can sell penicillin.
Yes.
So, and the same thing goes with this. There are proven things at work. If you put value and if you put focus on certain areas of your life and you help develop a full life, you got a better chance at recovery, but they can't monetize that. They can monetize treatment. And that's why that's gotten all the attention. Am I wrong?
No, that is why, prevention gets winked at. And I'm not talking primary prevention, the SUD side, but even in primary health. So,
yeah,
look, the standard things that we know over time and the plans that have been developed, silos, and I say they're cute terms, but here's how the constitutionally, can't you people get your together?
Now, I'm
the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
But this has been a mess forever. You've been doing this for a long time. I mean, 30 plus years in this business, 39 years in recovery. Even NIH, National Institute of Health, Department of Health, SAMHSA, all these places, they still do not have one agreed upon measurement of recovery. There is none out there yet. Why is it so hard to come up with a standard measure of recovery?
Well, yes,
because they create their own.
Thank you, and that is such a great question. And I say it's chock full of energy. What do I mean by that?
Okay.
There's all kinds of preconceptions about recovery.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the disease itself. Yes.
Or the disease itself, where I ended up going, all this individual work and Palm Beach County, we were able to reflect it in our recommendations, as well as our, when we put money out to bid, you call it a request for proposal, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, the term resilience, right, which is a common language, and its utilization is outside of the mental health, behavioral health space as well.
Right.
So resilience is true in primary health, and I really, where I was at toward the tail end of my tenure at Palm Beach County, was reflected in the monies that were put out to bid, was resilience and recovery ready communities. And what did I mean by that? I really wanted to live out Desmond Tutu's quote, which is, we've got to stop pulling people out of the river. We've got to go upstream to figure out why they're falling in the first place.
Yes.
And so what government unfortunately does, it relies on what I call stale data sets, right? So in other words, they'll publish something, but the data is 2 years old. So it's almost useless to you.
Absolutely. And folks, if you don't believe it, just Google addiction stats, a simple thing. And all the stats you're going to get, the earliest you're going to get is 2023.
Yeah, thank you.
It takes forever. There's no live action following of this, or at least there's no live action reporting.
Thank you. And that is what Commonwealth is masterful at. And what I did was to take, I liken Recovery Capital Index, which is the trademarked instrument, and it's more than an instrument, it's a platform. But regardless of that, it's a lifetime blood pressure check of not only the individual, but also of a community. And so Palm Beach County launched what we call a Shaping a Healthier Palm Beach County. And the intention was I can't rely on these stale data sets. I've got to get live actionable data into the hands that are made of the individuals and coalitions that are, that the county was funding to at the local level to pursue the change that is really necessary. And frankly, what it also does is to start to identify by zip code where the resources should go. And what we're going to know then very clearly is communities of color.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much.
Yeah.
We got a long way to go, I assume.
Yes.
I would assume we're not close to there yet. Do you ever see this coming together where we're all working in the same direction, instead of insurance companies looking in one way, treatment centers looking in another way, and everything else, and even our government agencies, again, another agenda? Do you see it all coming together at some point, or are we getting close to that?
Well, and again, what Commonwealth has presented me an opportunity to do is to be that beacon, if you might, understanding government, and in essence, creating a playbook for governmental entities, around the country. I mean, look, and we saw it true of tobacco settlement. We're seeing it with opioid settlement now. Dollars going out the door, unplanned for or not well planned for. And the major question is, how are you measuring success? And no one's going to be able to answer that. So we do have to have a common language, a common measure. And I was true when I was with the county. I don't see the recovery capital as the singular measurement, but boy, when I was first introduced to it, and being in the field for as long as I had, and knowing we lacked meaningful outcomes, Scott, when I tell you, I thought this is a game changer.
Yeah,
it is a game changer. Getting operators, providers to embrace that is a whole nother business, headaches. But ultimately, working with funders, this is inclusive of private foundations who there really is, particularly lately in the last 2 or 3 years, I call it the evidence economy.
Right.
Like folks are finally getting a little bit fed up about the insanity of funding the same things and just getting the same results.
Would you go to a doctor who doesn't fix you and then go back again and again? How about your mechanic? I mean, that's what people fix my brakes. You go in, you find out you got a lube job, but the brakes are still bad. How many times do you keep going back before you say, that's not working, let me try something else? We need to look at this with a critical eye and say, why would we send people back to the same places over and over? Why aren't we looking at what's going on? What is the challenges? Yeah. And I'll tell you what, the Recovery Capital Index, listen, the Wright brothers built the first plane and flew the first plane, but that wasn't the end all and be all of planes, but it was the important one. This is the beginning. It's going to grow. Other things are going to grow from it, but it's a starting point that's really important. We're seeing more and more RCOs and things like that popping up. I think recovery communities are starting to come together in a better way. Do you see hope in this?
No, absolutely. And, I've been around long enough. I was at the seminal event that stood up what became the National Faces and Voices Recovery. That was in St. Paul, Minnesota in the 2000s, the first federal grant program, recovery community services program. So I've been around a long time, but that, and no secret as to why when I started, and literally when I arrived here, there was a plan developed by a consultant paid well that did not mention a term recovery.
Wow.
Right. At least they had enough sense to recommend they needed a drug czar steering committee. But, and the money that was appropriated and then tied to that when the plan was adopted in 2017 was all spent. So I literally started with a plan that didn't mention recovery and no money, but we were able to repurpose over time. And, no secret why we started with a center in Delray and subsequently in Lake Worth and then Riviera Beach and Belglade, out west. And, everything there was I call it the method to the madness. Why? Because the provider will tell you length of stay is the predictor. It's not. It's length of engagement. How do we keep people engaged?
Yeah.
So those centers are an engagement point. They're an on-ramp, and there isn't this singular way to recovery, i.e. through a treatment door, although a system has been built in that way. And people often land in treatment. They're over-treated, and we can actually cause more harm than good. And we don't want to have those critical types of conversations.
It creates a reliance on the system by the person who's suffering. Whereas, they've got your back on everything. You're not making your own decisions. You're not doing anything that's proactive in your own recovery other than letting them run the show, which can be damaging because then you step on the outside. You don't have that 24-hour support. You don't know what to do. And God forbid you end up in one of these halfway houses or sober homes that does not support you. And all of a sudden everything falls apart. I believe the aftercare is so much more important than the primary care.
The question is, what happens after? If you spend, as I have, time with parents I've lost a lot of time with them, inevitably the initial conversation goes like this: if only my son or daughter would have had a next, like as if the next day was going to be the one that worked. Yet when you spend time with them and ask, well, what do you think was missing in their care? And inevitably it would be, wow, the housing, the barriers around convictions and employment.
Yeah.
They weren't really an AA. They felt like that was being forced down their throat, all those types of things. And when you then get the data sets, from the neutral survey, which are telling you the same thing the parents are telling, this is anecdotal, but this is also evidence, actionable data. And, government talks, Scott, about government-informed decision-making. We actually did it in Palm Beach County, live, actionable data. From the work at Florida Atlantic University in developing that evidence, they stood up a Center for Integrated Recovery and Wellness Studies, not to talk about study treatment efficacy, but the impacts of social determinants of health on one's own overall wellness, health and wellness and recovery. And so these are kind of the leave behinds for me.
Yeah.
That I get to smile and say, Not good job, John. My joke is I want to retire and go work at Pet Rescue. I don't want to be helping humans.
Oh, John, we've come up to the end of our time. And first of all, I want to ask, will you come back? Because there's so much more that you and I need to discuss. And I think taking just a couple of these things we talked about and really deep diving and maybe doing some live programs so that people can ask questions.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Always, Scott.
I think we could really do that.
Jersey guy.
Yeah. Let me end with this thought. John, you've been doing this for a while now, but let's say we could transport 5 years in the future. What changes would you like to see that you think are really important that happen now in the next 5 years?
We're working on them now at Florida Association Recovery Residents. Scott, we were talking, on those two key elements of housing stability and employment. We place those squarely on the backs of the newly recovering person, and we expect them to get well. And when they lapse, we stigmatize our own peeps. It's like, what did you do wrong? Rather than critically assess the system. And so what I see 5 years out is a continued emphasis on that transition, and recovery residences should be looked at as a transitional moment with the ultimate eye toward more permanent, stable housing with infused community supports. And Palm Beach County is the evidence that can be done. It takes a cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs guy like me to dare to do it. But with folks like FARR and making meaning out of these opioid settlement dollars, working with Commonly Well, working with other governments. But here in Florida, FARR taking the lead on making sure that we build in some meaningful housing supports and recovery supports for individuals it's going to be a good day.
And just remember, back to the beginning of our conversation, this is the guy who did not want to get involved in law and all this other stuff. And this is where he's been for the last 30 years, stuck in it. 39 years in recovery, director of government affairs for Commonly Well, consulting with FARR. And by the way, this is FARR and Beyond podcast.